We have to watch our behavior is basically what he's saying here.
And you can ask us questions, not just on service, anything you'd like to.
Anything that comes up. But in order to get us going, I'm going to tell a joke, which was in a recent blog. So everybody who reads our blog will know this, but the rest of you. So a grandfather and his son are in a store, a supermarket, and the son is like 5 or 6 years old, and the grandson, and he's complaining and whining and moaning, "When can we go? I'm tired, I want to go home." And the grandfather says, "Just 5 more minutes, William, then we can go." And they're in the next aisle, and the kid's again complaining, and the grandfather says, "Just 1 more item to buy, William, then we can go home." And finally they're in the checkout line, and the kid is again just complaining and whining. By this time he's crying, and the grandfather says, "All we have to do, William, is pay the bill, then we can go out to the car and we're going to go home." And so they pay the bill and they're exiting, and this woman comes up. She says, "You know, I've been watching you with your grandson, William, and I'm just so impressed with how patient you are and how kind you are." And the grandfather says, "Well, thank you very much, but you're mistaken. See, I'm William." The grandson's name is Harry.
So if you have any questions about that joke, you can ask those too.
If you want to know why somebody would tell a joke like that, Davy will answer that.
I've actually been trying to figure that out for a long time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, me too. Okay, so anyone?
Okay, we're supposed to repeat the question, so just briefly, how do you keep the show on the road?
What's it like with a really busy schedule and a lot of travel? Do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. You know, someone asked me that recently. They said, "How do you keep going?" And I said, "Well, God keeps putting gas in the gas tank. As soon as we just drive. And as soon as he stops putting gas in the gas tank, the car will stop." So that's sort of a glib answer, but it's the truth. It's like whatever's in front of us, somehow the energy is there to do it. And also I know many people, friends have told me that they pray for us a lot on our travels, and we can feel that. I mean, with all the traveling we do, nothing goes wrong. I mean, nothing. It's just sort of astonishing. And so there's a protective aura of grace. But I think the thing that's applicable to everyone in asking the question is you just look at, Christ said it's sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Every day you look at what you need to do. And if you just, sometimes I'll look at emails and I go, "Oh my God." And then I just think, okay, just answer 10. Answer 10. That's all you have to do today. And then you get into the flow, and it's okay. But it's about overcoming mental resistance. That's all it is. And whatever food is served to you, whatever bed you sleep in, however long you have to wait for an airplane, whatever it is, you kind of learn to be more centered in yourself, so you're not that affected by what's happening outside of you, which is very important. And then you just kind of get in a flow. And, and if you stop and think about it, I remember when I was a little girl, there was a Daffy Duck cartoon that for some reason made a very deep impression on me. And it was Daffy.
Probably why she ended up marrying me.
And it was Daffy Duck was in the boxing. I don't know if everybody knows who Daffy Duck is. He was an iconic figure in the 19th
Yeah,
cartoon. And so in this cartoon, Daffy Duck and he had a lisp. Daffy Duck would talk like that. And he was in a boxing ring with this huge opponent, and the opponent was much bigger than he was, which is sort of like what you face every day. And the opponent was chasing him around the ring, and Daffy was running and running, and then his legs started going faster and faster and faster, and finally they just started rotating, and he took off like with a propeller, and then he looked at the camera as an aside, or the audience, I should say, and he said, "I'm so crazy, I don't know, this is impossible." And, and that has been kind of a guiding light in my life. So.
So I think that leaves me as Daffy to explain why it's not impossible. Davy touched on it. 90% of fatigue is our internal resistance. Right in the moment, you're rarely really uncomfortable in the moment. What you're uncomfortable about is thinking of all the things that are going to follow. But if you can, the more you can stay in the moment and the more you can stay willing, then actually you find that the moment is actually pretty fun all the time. I think we were counting up, we were in 28 different flights last year. Well, that's a lot of time checking in and you're at the airport. Well, if you start thinking, oh, I hate airports, that's 28 chances to be hateful. But if you just accept, oh, airports are nice, and this one has that nice bookstore and that, so you just stay positive. If you can get your mind to be positive about what you're doing in the moment, then not only do you enjoy it, but fatigue goes away. It's when you begin to, when your energy drops a little bit and you get a little bit tired, then you aren't able to stay positive, and then things start piling up and it seems terrible. But, it's been extremely good for us spiritually to be as busy as we have because it's transformative. And I can't say that the transformation is finished yet. We still have our times of resistance. We still have the times, but I can see so very clearly now that it's the resistance and the mental negation of something that makes it difficult, not the thing itself. And so stay in the moment, be happy, stay positive, and you'll have fun.
I saw a quote by Swami recently. I saw it. It said, "He who accepts everyone as they are will find friends everywhere." And acceptance is such a big part of it, because if not just people, but situations, I accept this, instead of I don't want this, I don't like this. But if you really just can accept everything in the moment, it's actually quite lovely, everything. When I said nothing goes wrong, sometimes things go wrong, but we were 2 years ago when we flew into Rome to do some programs at Assisi, our bags got lost, our suitcases got lost. And, usually it's not a big problem, but they didn't have any tracer on our bags. And the lady, it was Lufthansa, and we kept going to the Lufthansa desk in Rome airport, and the lady said, "Well, we don't know where your bags are. We don't know what," and we'd go back the next day, and finally I just went up to the desk, and I didn't mean to do this, but I just burst out crying, and I said, "This is really hard." And the woman said, "Okay, we'll find your bags, And she did. I mean, they were at the airport somewhere, and we got them, and we went home, so anyway, sometimes you just have to accept it, but it isn't always great, but it all works out in the end.
But honestly, by and large, you get to this is our experience, and it's something that is available to everyone. You get to the point where so much is being asked that, as the Borg would say, resistance is futile. You know, if you keep resisting, you're just going to make yourself unhappy. And so you just get to the point where you say, thank you, God, everything's fine. And then it is. It's so much. Master one time wrote that he was writing to Dr. Lewis, and he said, I would go to all of, this was in the 20s and 30s when smoking was not something that was frowned upon. And he said, I would go to all of these places and these meetings and luncheons, and I would come back and my hair and robes, clothing was just reeking with smoke. And he said, it used to bother me a great deal. And then I decided Divine Mother is in the smoke. And so I just accepted the smoke. And he said, from that time on, it's never bothered me. So, and he was writing Dr. Lewis to say, the power of the mind determines everything. If you can get your mind to flip to the positive flow, then everything else it becomes relatively easy.
Some of you have heard parts of this story. I don't know if you've heard all of it, but some years ago, we were going up to Lake Tahoe to go skiing with Swami, and he was driving, and he was skiing in those days, so that was a while ago. And as we were driving, it started snowing, and we were going over the Donner Pass, which very often when we're going over Donner Pass, Jyotish will begin telling me the story of what happened to the Donner Party, which always is a little scary, but if you don't know this story. But so
she really enjoys the story, so I try to entertain her so she isn't bored.
So there were these signs flashing, put on chains. So Swami hit the brake to pull over to put on chains, but unbeknownst to him, the tires were bald, and the car went into a spin, and it was just spinning free form. And, you know, there was pretty heavy snow by this time, and cars were coming the other way. And it was just spinning and spinning, and then finally it crashed into a Greyhound bus along the side of the road. And the car was pretty total, but none of us were hurt. So Swami, accepting the moment, accepting what is, he gets out of the car, looks at the car, looks up at the bus we hit. He said, this is going to the same resort we were going to go to. And so we called up AAA, and they were going to tow the truck. And we just got on the bus with our bags, and people on the bus were, then Swami just transformed the bus. And he started having a satsang on the bus. And people were saying, oh, it's such a pity, it's such a pity. And he said, you know, in a week I would feel fine. Why waste that time? And then he started telling everyone on the bus this story, a parable, about there was a king, and he had his closest minister was a wise advisor, and no matter what happened, the man would say, everything that happens is for the best. Everything that happens is for the best. And the other advisors were jealous of this man because he was clearly the king's favorite. And one day, the king was out hunting, and there was a hunting accident, and the bow string cut off one of his fingers. And this was reported back, you know, the king came back, and they reported back to this minister, and the minister said, everything that happens is for the best. Everything is for the best. And the jealous advisors went to the king, and they told him this. And he got upset. Because the man wasn't expressing sympathy. And he said, throw him in prison. So they threw this chief advisor in prison. And then time went by, and the king healed, and he was out hunting again. But this time, the party was captured by a group of cannibals. I'm not sure what
Not the Donner Party.
and so they were about to sacrifice the king, and then they looked, and they saw that one of his fingers were missing. And they said, oh, he's imperfect. We can't sacrifice him. Let him go. And so the king started thinking about what the minister had said, that everything is for the best. And he went to the prison. He said, please forgive me my dear friend and advisor, you were right, and I'm so sorry that I threw you in prison. And the man said, everything that's happened for the best. He said, how can you say that? Here you've been languishing for weeks in this prison. He said, yes, King, but if I wasn't in the prison, I would have been out hunting with you, and I have all of my fingers. So everything that happens is for the best.
There's another little sub-story to the car spinning around. Devi and another woman were in the back seat. I was in the front seat with passenger seat. And this other woman, as the car started spinning, grew hysterical.
Hysterical, not historical.
Did I say historical?
Yeah.
That's the Donner Party again. She was hysterical, saying, Swami, Swami, Swami! And the car spun around and crashed into the bus. And Swami turned around and said, what? But he was able to maintain absolute calmness in the midst of that, and then also be able to give a satsang on the bus afterwards. Okay, next question.
Just for the record, no one's ever quoted both the Borg and Daft.
Okay, Doug's asking, can we talk about selfless service and self-care? And that's a very, very important question, because the flip side to, serving a lot, or at any kind of a life, it doesn't have to be, a life of travel, but you get tired and you get burned out, and especially when you get pushed constantly against that edge where you are tired, you can get not only burned out, but you can get sick, and it happens very, very regularly. And so if you can remove the resistance, if you can drive the car without any brakes on, then the brakes don't wear out. But who can do that? We've all got one foot on the brake, or almost all of us. So given that that's true, you do have to find where your limitation of willingness is, and not keep crossing that and pushing yourself to cross it all the time. Devi and I try as much as possible to build in little parts of the day, because we can't, our life is such that we can rarely build in a chunk of time, like a weekend or something where there are no obligations. But we build in little times during the day when we can rest, or we can go for a walk, or we can do something. So you've got to be able to also keep that balance where you can disconnect. Swami would work very intensely, and then he would take a trip. And that was more the way that he was able to balance the demands on him. And that trip would be just for relaxation, and it would also be kind of a way of celebrating with Divine Mother the finishing of a project.
But taking it on a slightly different tact, I think it's important for every single sincere devotee to have self-honesty. And what are things that you genuinely like to do? And maybe somebody else thinks it's dumb or silly or frivolous, but one of our younger members, the next wave members at Ananda Village, who just serves so amazingly, constantly, dynamically, she kind of went in a little tailspin, and she came and talked to us, and she said, I just like to listen to Justin Timberlake music, and I don't know if it's okay. And we said, of course it's okay. If that's what helps you to relax, then you do that. And
she likes to dance.
Yeah, listen to it and dance. So I think for each of us, I kind of have outgrown it a little bit, but I had Broadway musicals for me were kind of where I would go into an altered state. But and I didn't know, was that okay? Is that okay? And then once I was taking seclusion at a certain point in Swami's life when he was in Italy a lot, he would allow people to take seclusion in his house. We don't do that anymore. But so I was taking seclusion at Swami's house, and there he had a kind of a stack of CDs, and there was all these Broadway musicals and that Swami had, and I borrowed them and I copied them, but it was again like validation, like, don't think you have to be somebody else to be on the spiritual path. You can only walk to God in the shoes you have on and the feet God has given you. And so you have to walk that path. And maybe somebody else says that's a dumb path, that's a lesser path. But if it's your path, and you're not going to find God any other way but walking your path. And so that sort of is answering your question of how do you feed yourself, self-care. Everyone has to do it in a way that brings them joy, and it's different. Jyotish loves to paint. That's not something that's part of my life, but I can tell when he goes into his little art studio, he just is so happy, probably the happiest of anything he does. And so people can say, well, that's just wasting time. You should be doing this or that, the other. It's what brings him joy. And then that joy translates into the rest of his life. So find what brings you joy and don't hesitate to do it. And don't think that we all have to march to God in the same way. Not at all. I think we told you this, but once Swami was giving a Kriya initiation, and we all went up for the blessing. And afterwards, he commented to a small group. He said, I had a very unusual experience as I was blessing you all during the Kriya. He said, I felt how each one of you, your path to God and to moksha, freedom, and how it was different for each one of you. And I mean, for one thing, that says a whole lot about Swami's level of perception. But more important, that every single person's path to God is different. And we can only find God with the way he put joy in our heart. And that's how we have to offer that joy back to him.
I'll just touch on the theme that Devi said. All of us have little things, either from past lives or from earlier in this life, that are basically innocent little pleasures that we have, be it listening to Broadway musicals or as an aside, she could probably sing all verses of every song from My Fair Lady with the words exact in it. And for me, that
we're not going to do that today, though.
that knowledge is not there. But nonetheless, what I'm saying here is that there are little patterns that each of us have that are associated with something that was enjoyable or fun, generally in this life, but maybe in a past life. If it's relatively innocent and it's not going to really hurt you, don't be too uptight about it. We have enough to do to align ourselves with God, and don't sweat the small stuff. The big ones, if it's alcoholism or something like that, then you have to work on avoiding that. But a Broadway musical is not going to ruin your consciousness. Generally speaking. Unless you get obsessive about it. But you know what I'm saying. So ease up on the little things, and it will help prevent you getting to that breaking point where you break down and then you have to kind of work your way back. And watch your health. Do things that are good for your health and enjoy it and take a little time. But you also have to let God take care of the body that you're serving with.
About 6 years ago, we took our granddaughter, who was 16 at the time, to Assisi with us, just to give her an experience of Ananda worldwide. And she was having a wonderful time But then she started, I could tell, getting a little homesick. So my dearest friend Uma was over there. So I called Uma and I said, Uma, can you help out here? She said, yes, come over. And so Uma polished her toenails and made us a nice dinner. And she said, now let's watch West Side Story. And so we were happily watching it. And then at a certain point, Riley, our granddaughter, took the remote and stopped it, and she stopped the movie, and she said, no more singing along. And we didn't even realize we were doing that. Anyway.
This is not something that should be widely broadcast, but I would say especially for you guys, never take a long road trip with Uma and Devi in the car at the same time, unless you really like Broadway musicals. Enough said.
Okay, does anyone dare to ask another question?
This is regarding what has to happen in the day. When I get up in the morning, the first thing that I say is thank you for whatever is coming. Because the activity that I have in the daytime is, everything can be unexpected. I work in a hospital. And before, I used to say, oh God, please help me not to hurt this one, oh God. And now, at this point, I'm going in the stage that I'm noticing it, which is the most important, that whatever has to happen is going to happen anyway. I'm not in charge of anything, as they say here, but I've been listening to this teaching for so many years, and sometimes I got it. And something unbelievable has happened, because whatever I was doing before, it was like, and it's changed. They closed down my unit, and they sent me to another unit, and everything is for the better. And so when I said thank you the first time, I put my feet out of the bed, and I started doing. It came to me that when God created the world, He did everything already. We don't have to create anything. It's already done. We're just participating in this play. And so why I have to worry about it? So I'm taking note today. I don't, but I decided to. And out of all that you have said, 2 words, God, which is self-forgetfulness, and another one, but I would say that one is just the one, because it's true. Is if I forget about myself and I let things happen, I go on the boat. You know, I'm not like the salmon that goes against the river. I go with the river. And sometime in my when I'm working, is that okay?
Yeah, it's good.
And I have to give playlists, lots of fusion on the other one. It has to be clean, and before I was just like, oh, I have to do. Now it has to happen anyway. If I don't do it, somebody has to do it. By the way, I have to do it, but something enters. I don't know in what sequence. That then, when I'm doing, I say, oh, it's done.
It's done.
Oh,
Yeah.
She came to help, and it's just going and going. Whatever has to come to me sometime, they say, no, it's not for you, it was a mistake, it's for someone else.
Wow.
And I keep marveling about it. Then when I come, because I moved to the farm, it's been a blessing, by the way, and my best time is the commute time. Because it's like something takes me to the farm. It's like I'm going away, you know, and I see the hills, and the green is greener, and it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but self-forgetfulness.
Yeah.
Don't worry what's going to happen in 1 more minute. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% in it, but I love it.
Right. That's wonderful. Just to repeat, she's to summarize, she's just letting go of a sense of constantly having to control or push things away. And in the doing of that, not only is it making her life much happier, but the circumstances are changing. And it's a very deep teaching that she was saying that as we begin to accept, then the universe doesn't have to send us those particular lessons anymore. And it looks from the outside like we're warping the universe around us, but we aren't. We're just kind of going to another level where there are different programs. So we graduate from the grade school level of having to try to control everything and worry about everything and force our will on the universe and just accept.
And really, what you said was very much an answer to Karen's question too, because you get to the point where you realize, I'm just like a little child. This is God's show. I'm just like a little kindergarten child, just doing, but somebody else has the big picture, and it's not me. And so if you just have that sense of, God, you show me where to be today and where to go and how to make it all happen, and I'll show up, but you're the one that's doing it all. And it's when you can't always stay in that state because it's until you're, I think, are very advanced, but you keep touching it, and then it becomes more and more part of your reality where you realize, I really can't do anything. And we can't. This really, not to be callous, but if it's their time to die in a hospital, whatever you do, it's not going to help. And if it's their time to live, even if you kind of flub it up, they're going to live. And it's the same. I was talking to a friend recently who had a very troubled daughter, two troubled daughters, twins, who one tried to commit suicide multiple times, and the other one was anorexic and was almost did herself in with bulimia. And she was a single mom raising her kids with the money she earned. And she had a good job, so that wasn't a big problem. But she said, I was so worried all the time. When's the next call going to come from the emergency room that your daughter's in here again with a drug overdose? And she said, I just felt like I could not stand my life anymore. I couldn't handle it. And she was a devotee, and she went and was praying. And the words that, in answer to her prayer that came, leave your fear at the altar and go love your children. And she said that just shifted everything for me. And when I went in and to see my daughter, they'd already pumped her stomach, I realized all I was projecting to her was fear and judgment and non-acceptance of what was going on. And she said, I just left that at the altar, and I looked at her, and she just said, let's go home, and total acceptance, total love, and from that point on, the daughter started getting better. So as long as she was trying to control it, and this is terrible, and what if this happens, it just made it worse. That when you just leave your fear, leave your anxiety, leave your judgment, leave your sense that you are in control, leave it on the altar, and just go out about your day like you're a child of God, and He's got it all planned out.
Is there any difference? Are you asking, is there a qualitative difference, or how do we serve each other?
We rarely give lectures to each other.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I suppose there's a qualitative difference because generally speaking, we fall into, one might say, habitual patterns of serving each other. She cooks, I do the dishes, and we have routines that we work with, as probably any married couples have. Then we do things that we enjoy together. And so it's more of a sharing and less of a thought of, in a sense, it's even less self-conscious because there isn't any thought that I'm serving you in what I'm doing. So when we're traveling around, you can get the delusion that you're serving, but that's, I don't know if that helps.
And also, I think part of the dharma of marriage is to be a support of the highest that's in your partner. And so you can't really do that with people you don't know that well, as well. And so, if you can kind of be very aware of what does my partner need now? I can tell he needs really quiet space now, and that's how I'll be serving him, is by giving him space. Or if they're a little down, try to do something, hey, let's go do this, let's do fun. So it's trying to always help each other stay in the highest expression of who they are. And if we're, let's face it, we're not always in that space. But if your partner is down or grumbling or negative, instead of preaching, you just kind of quietly hold up a mirror of who they really are, who you really know them to be, without saying anything. And it helps. It's that kind of soul service where you're just helping each other move towards God. And, hey, did you do your energization today? Oh, gosh, I didn't do it yet. Okay. So you're always just reminding each other what your life is really about. And helping, because we all get down, we all get discouraged, we all, the burdens of the world sometimes seem more than we can deal with. And just to say, from a spirit, and Swami did this for all of us too, from a high spiritual level, say, you'll get through this. Not saying you should be different, just unconditional love, support, and appreciation and gratitude for what you have. So it's a beautiful form of service, really, and it gives you a lot of strength.
Yeah, in a long-term close relationship, the service gradually moves to be more vibrational and just quiet, loving support, as opposed to this thing and that thing and so on. As it matures, it gets very beautiful because, the conflicts in a marriage are generally from one or both partners become self-protective for something, some attitude, something, and that ends up creating a conflict. And then gradually, a long-term relationship, you work out those kinks where you don't have to be so self-protective anymore, and it can just be loving support. And then everything else changes. Conflicts fall away, and it just gets easier and more beautiful.
And you learn the art of when not to hit the ping pong ball back. So if something happens and you could react and say something, you say, I know where that game's going to go, and you just don't hit the ball back. Or if we both do this for each other, if one of us starts getting into kind of a negative space, and they're different for both of us, and starts complaining about something, Jyotish is just very good at just keeping reading. He just is not going to hit the ball back and say, you're right, you should be upset. He just, and then the ball just falls, and it doesn't go out.
Yeah, no fun to play ping pong where you hit the ball and it doesn't get hit back, and then you have to go and chase it, and pick it up, and come
hit it
back,
again.
hit it again. And anyway, we said the phrase "God serving God." Who's the first one and who's the second one? Yeah, there really is only one. And that was Master's point, that it appears that there's separation. That's what keeps this whole thing going. See, behind the scenes, there isn't separation. If we could back off and go into a high state, the sense of separation disappears. And so what Master was really saying is that at a higher state, it's only God playing both parts. And so God is serving God, but also God is being served. And from both standpoints. There's a beautiful book by Ananda Ma talking about her early life. And she would, as a teenager and when she was, even from a young childhood, but she would go into these states of samadhi where she would just collapse on the floor, and all the life force would be drained out of her, and she would be in what looked like an unconscious state to somebody outside, but in that state she was absolutely connected. And when she would come out, she would say, there can be no question of separation in that state. That even the thought of God serving God couldn't arise in that higher state, because it's all one. So even to say God serving God implies that there are two gods, but that's the state that keeps this universe going, the duality of it. What Master was really saying is try to see behind that duality to the unity. She said, should I think of myself as God or as God flowing through me? At our state of consciousness, it's better to think that God is flowing through you, because otherwise we aren't yet able to really hold the thought that I am everything in the universe. Until that experience comes in samadhi, we can hold it intellectually, and that can be helpful. But the reality is, as long as you think you're separate, then it's better to see God flowing through you. And Master put it in the way, as long as you think that you're the wave, it's better to see that the ocean has become the wave, rather than you, the wave, are now the whole ocean.
And I think it might be a little more easy to understand if you don't think, well, God is flowing through me, but think about the qualities of God. Love is flowing through me. Joy is flowing through me. Peace is flowing through me. So all calmness, all of those things, wisdom. And so that we can do. You look at someone, young man came to talk with us a few days ago who was troubled, and he's in his probably early 30s, but he was just sobbing, and I just thought my heart was going to break just watching him, and we just had to go over and stroke his head, and so I could just feel God's love was not God is coming through me, but that love and compassion and sympathy was coming to him. But the important, when you say which one is God, and this is what we learned from Swamiji, if God is flowing through you to another person, the God in you to the God in them, it's reciprocal, because the God in them gives energy back to you. That's what Swami, he always served the highest in each one of us. That divine consciousness came through him to each one of us, and it awakened in us, oh, I have that love within me too. I have that joy within me too. So it isn't just like pouring water on a sidewalk. It's pouring water on a flower. And when you water that flower, that other person, that animal, that plant, with divine consciousness, then they radiate that out to the world as well.
Okay.
Maybe one last question. Chidambara.
Ego transcendence.
How is how is ego transcendence going for us? Slow process, slow process.
Fair to Midland, let's.
You know, it's the ego. Well, there are a lot of different analogies one could have, but the ego more gets melted away than blasted away. Master, in fact, said the ego is not something that you can get a stick of dynamite and go and blow up. So you can't say to your ego, I'm going to blow you up, and then you're not going to be there anymore. But through self-forgetfulness, through trying to keep your consciousness, high in an uplifted state, it's more like the ego disappears. There was a very common experience that people had when they would go to ask for an interview with Swami. They would go with all these questions in their mind, and then they would be with Swami, and he would maybe give them some tea or talk a little bit, and they'd forget their questions. They'd forget what they wanted to ask. And then after they left and their consciousness went back down, then they'd remember, I forgot to ask him this and this and this and this. But in that uplifted state, the questions disappear. So coming back, how's it going? Well, as we're able to hold our consciousness in a little higher state, or God is holding our consciousness in a little higher state, the questions of the ego aren't there so much anymore, nor are the problems of the ego there.
And I'll say this to more address to everybody, and this will be the last thing I think I'll say. I don't know if Jyotish has more. I think there's a special grace now in Ananda's work globally, that one can feel the blessings of Master, Babaji, and Swamiji more strongly than I've ever been aware of them. Maybe they were always there, but I was too dense to be aware of them. But I can just, having the opportunity to see Ananda in many different expressions, and the devotee and the growth in the devotees. I mean, we see it here in all of you. I mean, those that we've known over some years, you're just you're transformed. You're not who you were years ago. You're much freer, much more full of light. And so I think for all of us, we have been given an extraordinary opportunity in this life. I think more than we really can possibly be aware of the grace of these masters, and then Swamiji. You know, no other disciple has worked with so many individuals to bring them forward spiritually. And, you know, we get letters, maybe many of you do too, from people who say, I never met Swami, but I listen to his books, and I read his books and listen to his music, and it's just absolutely changing my life, absolutely. And I can't help but think that he's my guide in this life. And these people never met him. And so I just feel that we have an opportunity now. And I mean, just what you're doing for this weekend, this dynamic service, but sadhana and attunement and all of these things. It's like we're a cadre of elite athletes, one might say, and we have the best coach in the world. And we can either say, well, I'm going to back off a little bit, you know, this lifetime, or we can say, I have so much at my disposal. I'm going to just give it everything I've got. And I think for all of us, not one or two, or you're so special and you travel all over the place, it really doesn't matter. I mean, you can be just sitting in your room and be very pleasing to God if your attitude is right. And so, but for all of us, just to be dynamically aware of what we have at our disposal right now and go deep with it. And really, Swami came and Master came with nothing less. Someone used the expression, we are moksha bound. We are bound for freedom. Don't set your sights any less than that. Any one of us. Say, oh, well, maybe them, but not me. That's not why they came. They came for every single one of us to find God. And there's a special grace now. And it will be wonderful when we're all maybe in Hiranya Loka and we can just say, how's it going for you, huh? You know.
Or look down and say, now that was a fun one. Didn't we have a good time together in that one? Remember that time in Palo Alto when we all put on that Yogananda fest?
And we had so many people, we just couldn't fit them all in. You know, we had 12,000 people come to see the tulips this year.
Yeah.
That's what we said. Yeah. Wow. That's a lot of maple scones.
Yeah. People are drawn to beauty, and people are drawn to joy, and not so drawn to lectures. So don't lecture, just be joyful. And be beautiful.
God bless you all. And we'll see you all tomorrow in one way or another. And thank you all. It was wonderful today. It was a wonderful meditation. You know, there was street noise, but there was so much stillness in the sanctuary. And thank you all for everything you shared.